Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Amy Burkett. In honor of Veterans Day, we'd like to say thank you to all the brave men and women who have served our country. During World War II, about 12% of the U.S. population served in the military. By comparison, the military makes up less than 1% of the population today. Historians say 16 million Americans served in some form or another in the 1940s, and every American felt the weight of the war. Food, gas, and clothing were rationed, taxes were raised. Carolina Impact's Danielle Koser joins us with one man's extraordinary story of life as a prisoner of war.
Thanks, Amy. Well, I remember sitting there in history class learning all about World War II. We had to memorize a lot of dates, when the war started, when it ended. But it wasn't until I sat down with 93-year-old Levi Caldwell that I truly understood the sacrifice so many men and women have made for my freedom.
The Liberator is hit.
They were shooting at me from the ground, and I could see the tracer bullets, just red, blue, and yellow, coming at me.
More than 70 years have passed since Levi Caldwell was shot down from a B-24 bomber during World War II. Step into his Charlotte home today, and it's like walking into a museum.
So this is a letter that I wrote on October the 25th, 1944.
Letters to home, newspaper clippings, and medals document the nearly 3 years he spent fighting for his country. Born into a family with 10 children, it's hard to imagine his parents' heartache when 7 of their sons left home to serve Uncle Sam. Levi's story starts in January 1943 when he was drafted.
There's not much excitement any way you go around it. When you get drafted, you're drafted. They're going to send you where they want you to go.
Levi shipped out to Italy with the Army Air Corps in March 1944, working as a flight engineer.
And this is Edward W. Bender, radio operator.
Months later, one of his missions went horribly wrong. Enemy forces shot down this plane after bombing an aircraft factory on the banks of the Danube River.
All of a sudden, there was just an explosion. It knocked me back across the aircraft to the other side. The flames were engulfing the whole side of the plane.
Falling quickly, Levi says the flight crew had 30 seconds to jump from the plane.
And I said, "Bender, you have to jump. The plane's on fire." He said, no, you go first. So I didn't hesitate. I went out. He came after me, and they shot him coming down in his parachute. Now, if he had not hesitated at that point, I would have been in his position. You have to think about that.
Levi says he barely survived the plane crash, waking up in Budapest to a boot on his chest and a rifle in his face.
And I said, man, I better not move anymore.
This marked the start of 10 months in captivity. Levi says soldiers took him to Gestapo headquarters, where officers interrogated and beat him before bringing him in front of a firing squad, asking,
"Mr. Caldwell, you have any last words?"
But for some reason, they didn't shoot.
I can't tell you what that was.
The interrogation and beating continued for a month before soldiers shipped him to a camp in Poland.
I was a prisoner of war in Stalag Luft 4.
Levi still has this postcard he sent home from camp.
"Dear folks, getting along fine, and don't worry about me as I'm being treated well."
But Levi says that was a lie. Dr. Brian Jones, a history professor at Johnson C. Smith University, explains why prisoners had to censor themselves.
If you write something that your captors are going to disapprove of, it'll never see the light of day. And so you write what you think they would want to hear.
But guards couldn't censor these journal entries, scribbled on the backs of cigarette labels collected from Levi's American Red Cross parcels. This one is dated December 9th, 1944.
"Red Cross parcel today, milk, coffee, cigarettes, Spam, chocolate."
In February, Allies made advances, forcing the guards to evacuate Levi and the nearly 9,000 other prisoners from camp, marching them 700 miles in the middle of winter.
If you could not get a barn to sleep in, you'd sleep outdoors, sometimes 30 below zero. Everybody caught dysentery, and it was, a mess.
After 87 days, the marching stopped. Levi says guards locked them in a barn, then disappeared. Before long, the arrival of British allies confirmed the war was over.
The barn we were in was surrounded by British tanks. And they didn't even give us a ride. They were so intent on going and joining up with the Russians that all they told us, head that way, bloke.
The war was over, but Levi's journey wasn't. Weighing only 80 pounds, he says he was so malnourished his own brother didn't recognize him when the two reunited at a hospital in France.
So I walked into his tent and I said, hello, James. And he looked at me and said, who are you? And I said, well, you ought to know.
After 6 weeks in the hospital, this is what Levi looked like when he returned home to his family and his girlfriend, Virginia.
She's the first one I got to.
And they've been together since. This photograph shows the two on their wedding day, June 14th, 1947.
And I just feel like it's a person's duty, you know, to protect his own country. So that's what I tried to do.
They've been called the greatest generation for a reason. I mean, these are men and women who fought and died with tremendous resiliency and courage in the face of terrible circumstances. There's just no other way to describe it.
The word bittersweet describes Levi's homecoming. His parents celebrated the safe return of 6 of their sons, but mourned the loss of their 7th enlisted son, Charles, one of the 400,000 Americans who paid the ultimate sacrifice for our country during World War II. As Levi pores over old letters and photographs, he reflects on the sacrifice his family and so many others made, fighting for the country we live in today. For Carolina Impact, I'm Danielle Koser reporting.
Thanks so much, Danielle. And happy anniversary to Levi and Virginia, who are looking forward to celebrating their 70th wedding anniversary soon. Levi is one of about 25,000 World War II vets living in North Carolina. Across our state, we have about 55,000 veterans who served in the Korean conflict, about 250,000 who served in Vietnam, and more than 290,000 Gulf War veterans. Altogether, that's 3/4 of a million veterans living in the Tar Heel State. Well, making the transition